それでは定刻となりましたので、ただいま。
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much indeed for your joining us on this International Forum Sustainable Ocean and G7 Ministers Meeting on Climate, Energy and the Environment in Sapporo. We sincerely welcome you to attend this forum. This is an in-person program in this building, as well as live streaming on the YouTube. And the video comes with the captions, so you can access to the caption through the link at the bottom of the screen if you are with us online. First, I invite Dr. Tsunami Atsushi, President of Sasakawa Peace Foundation, for an opening remark. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is the Tsunami, President of Sasakawa Peace Foundation. Thank you very much indeed for joining us with this International Forum, Sustainable Ocean and G7 Ministers Meeting on Climate, Energy and the Environment in Sapporo. Sharing your schedule with us today. We are very pleased to have Minister Nishimura, the Environment, Minister of the Environment, and Mr. Hoshino, State Minister of the Cabinet Office. Mr. Nishimura has been the leadership role, has been a leader in the ocean environment protection, and Mr. Hoshino just attended our ocean conference with us in Panama last month, and discussed with the world leaders the issues to realize sustainable ocean. And thank you very much indeed for your participation from government ministries as well.
Attending our forum by online. It is great to see you, Ambassador Peter Thompson, United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy for the Ocean, who was here in Tokyo last December to attend the Nikkei Blue Ocean Forum. I also pay tribute to Deputy Director General Angela Pausoni-Elad of the World Trade Organization for achieving the adoption of an agreement on the ban of harmful fishery subsidies in June last year. I extend my tribute to Her Excellency Ambassador Lina Lee, President of the BBNJ Intergovernmental Conference for achieving the adoption of the BBNJ agreement last month. I also like to thank Ms. Matsuo Philip, Executive Secretary of Secretariat of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for Plastics Pollution, for her presence, who has been spearheading negotiations on another important international instrument vital for achieving a sustainable ocean. I appreciate all the others who are with us to share your wisdom and expertise for our discussions today. This forum, as you see from its title, is geared towards mobilizing ideas and suggestions to support deliberations at the forthcoming G7 Ministers meeting on climate, energy, environment in Sapporo to be held next week. I'm sure that we'll have very rich and inspiring discussions that will become a useful input for the G7 Ministers meeting in Sapporo. Once again, thank you for your support and look forward to today's discussion and continuous collaboration with you all. Thank you.
以上、須波理事長よりご挨拶申し上げました。
Thank you very much, Mr. Tsunami, Dr. Tsunami. Now, I should like to invite the distinguished guests. First, I'd like to invite Minister Akihiro Nishimura of Environment to give us welcoming remarks. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Nishimura Akihiro, the Minister of Environment. On this occasion, thank you very much for inviting me to the symposium. I'd like to express my appreciation to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and those concerned in organizing this symposium. I wish to say a few words. Today, the world is faced with three crises, namely the climate crisis, biodiversity loss, and pollution, and then the energy crisis triggered by the Russian invasion into Ukraine, and ocean environment is affected by all those crises. Next week, I'm going to chair the G7 Ministers meeting on climate, energy, and environment in Sapporo. I'm looking forward to active discussion on marine environment-related initiatives as well as concrete solutions to the environmental challenges in the world. Japan is surrounded by ocean on four fronts. It is a maritime nation with a vast EEZ, which is 12 times larger than the land area. And also, this is the only country that has the national holiday of the Day of Ocean to cherish the blessings by the ocean. The key to the sustainable ocean is the biodiversity conservation. In December, the agreement was reached on Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And then last month, the Biological Diversity Beyond National Jurisdiction Agreement, the substance of that agreement was reached, representing major progress on this front. In Japan, by 2030, we aim for stalling at the loss of biodiversity loss and reverse that trend under the 30 by 30 target to conserve more than 30% of land and sea. On the part of Ministry of Environment, we have formed 30 by 30 alliance that includes municipalities as well as private sector, and so far more than 400 organizations have joined there. And in Sapporo, we're going to demonstrate the activities by various countries and various entities, stakeholders that are working on biodiversity conservation. Another important activities are related to plastic pollution in the ocean. In 2019, at the time of G20 Osaka Summit, Japan advocated Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, where by 2050, the new pollution by marine plastic the pollution be brought down to zero. And right now, this target is shared by more than 80 countries and regions. And last year, in November, at the time of the Intergovernmental Negotiation Committee to create International Convention on the Plastic Pollution, Japan led the negotiation to create a framework that will be joined by all the countries, and that we are aiming for agreement to be reached by the end of 2024. Therefore, at G7, we are willing to make a strong declaration from Sapporo to show our strong determination. This meeting is participated by experts and those concerned on maritime environment conservation. I hope that this is going to be the place for active exchange of views and opinions on maritime environment conservation, promoting international cooperation and partnership. In conclusion, I'd like to express my appreciation to those concerned at the Sasakawa Peace Foundation led by President Tsunami for their contribution. G7 ministerial meeting is going to meet next week, and I would strive for the great success of that meeting. Thank you very much once again.
西村環境大臣、ありがとうございました。それではこれより
Minister Nishimura, thank you very much. We'd like to go on to the keynote addresses, first by His Excellency Mr. Tsuyoshi Hoshino, State Minister of Cabinet Office, Government of Japan, in charge of disaster prevention and economic security. You have the floor. Minister Nishimura, Ambassador Thompson, And ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tsuyoshi Hoshino, the State Minister of Cabinet Office, Government of Japan. Thank you very much indeed for this opportunity. On the 2nd and 3rd of March, I attended the Our Ocean Conference held in Panama. This was held for the 8th time, and I attended this meeting as a government representative. This conference is called as a Davos meeting for the ocean, and I delivered the message of the Koichi Tani, the minister in charge of ocean policy. And I said that taking advantage of G7 presidency, Japan is ready to lead the efforts for world peace and prosperity. I also announced the Japanese governmental commitment of about $3.3 billion for 25 programs for climate change and the ocean pollution programs. I also had the meetings with the ministers and political leaders of the government of Panama and other countries. And these leaders expressed the appreciation for the Japanese commitment through its the ocean policy and the contribution to the ocean area, as well as the commitment that I expressed at the conference. I also confirmed the importance of the further collaboration in the area of ocean with these leaders. This was a very significant meeting, and I really appreciated this opportunity to attend this conference. In order to address the various the ocean issues, the international community need to work in partnership with the countries who share the objective of protecting rich ocean. And Japan will formulate its basic plan on ocean policy by May this year, with a key objective of the building the ocean security, comprehensive ocean security, and the sustainable ocean. And this ocean policy will include the ocean program for ocean policy, which attracts the global attention, and while taking into consideration various countries' specific situations. This program will have some programs which can be replicated by other countries. For example, Japan has built the MDA system as the ocean big data, and part of that information is shared with the public, and will continue to build the further international network. And the observation and the research of the Arctic region, which is affected by the climate change as the island nations, will benefit the entire humanity. Japan will complete the building and bring into the service an ice-breaking Arctic research ship, which will be utilized as an international research platform. And Japan has led the initiative of Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, which will reduce to zero the additional the marine plastic debris by 2050. And Japan has developed about 17,000 the waste management personnel in developing nations. We will continue to lead the leadership role in building rules for oceans, including the marine plastic debris, and the climate change action cannot wait in order to maintain the rich ocean. And Japan has been committed to 2050 carbon neutrality, and we will utilize the Green Climate Fund and ODA tools, as well as development of zero emission the ships and the promotion of offshore wind farms in order to lead the climate change action globally. these programs that will be offered will be built as the Japan model to be shared and collaborated with international partners and including the private sector in order to promote the realization of the rich ocean. And the realization of the rich ocean requires the free and stable ocean environment. Since last year, not only Europe, but also in Asia, the international order has been being shaken. But any party in the world, an attempt to change the status quo by force shouldn't be allowed. We will continue to espouse the importance of the realizing free and open Indo-Pacific and the maintenance of the ocean, the maritime order based on the rule of law. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoshino.
海洋特使より
Next, I should like to call upon His Excellency Ambassador Peter Thompson, the United Nations Secretary General Special Envoy for the Ocean. Those keynote speakers are going to attend this session remotely, so please look at the screen in front of you. Now, over to you, Ambassador Thompson.
Senator Nishimura, State Minister Hoshino, President Tsunami, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Warm greetings to all those gathered for this international forum, and many thanks to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation for the privilege of addressing you all today. Ladies and gentlemen, I respectfully ask that you pay special attention to the words I'm about to quote. They come from the G7 Ocean Deal Statement, adopted at the G7 Leaders Summit in June last year in Germany. Quote, "The ocean's ecological functions are indispensable for our joint efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change, halt and reverse biodiversity loss, ensure food and nutrition security, and foster sustainable and resilient livelihoods for coastal populations worldwide. We must therefore stop and reverse the overexploitation of natural resources and the degradation of marine environment, and combat the severe level of pollution and the accelerating effects of climate change and biodiversity loss, which are exacerbating cumulative pressures on the ocean. We note with consternation that the respective ocean-related commitments made under the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the relevant UNEA resolutions, as well as relevant commitments under the Convention on Biological Diversity, are nowhere near sufficiently implemented yet." End of quote. The Ocean Deal commits G7 countries to lead global efforts on the protection, conservation, restoration, and sustainable and equitable use of the global ocean. The statement goes on to set out how the G7 intends to do that through the facilitation of international ocean governance and the delivery of concrete ocean action within and beyond the G7. It closes with the affirmation that the G7 Ocean Deal will lay the groundwork for further G7 collaboration in this critical decade. Ladies and gentlemen, given the fact that the G7 Ocean Deal was adopted in June 2022, I think it is fair to ascribe to it some of the success achieved in ocean action over the last 12 months. Since then, the dialogue on ocean and climate change has taken a step up with the appointment of co-facilitators and the strong showing made by the global ocean community at UNFCCC's COP27, with more to come at COP28 this year. Of course, the most effective indicator of success in this dialogue will be a rapid, positive movement of climate finance in the direction of conservation and restoration of marine ecosystems and truly sustainable ocean economies. On the subject of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee's work to develop an internationally legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, The first committee session has been successfully held. The second session will be held in Paris in May, and humanity has every right to expect the evolution of a robust, workable treaty by the end of next year that will allow us to control the plague of plastic pollution that we have afflicted upon the environment and thereby ourselves. At the WTO in Geneva, after 20 years of negotiation, in June last year, the Ministerial Council reached agreement on banning of subsidies to the fishing industry, supporting exploitation of overfished stock and IUU fishing. Since then, a new chairman has been appointed for the WTO negotiating group that must work on the second SDG 14.6 task at hand, namely the banning of subsidies that support overcapacity in the fishing industry. Hopes are high that this task will be completed in time for the 13th WTO Ministerial Conference in February 2024. At the end of 2022, at COP15 of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, we witnessed the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and the inclusion thereof of the target of protecting 30% of the planet by 2030. Since the ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, the implication for a great increase in effectively financed and governed marine protected areas are loud and clear. And then in February this year, the proverbial ship reached the shore with the conclusion of the BBNJ agreement, an international agreement on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biodiversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, known popularly as the High Seas Treaty. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres hailed the agreement as a victory for multilateralism and for global efforts to counter the destructive trends facing ocean health now and for generations to come. As I wrote in a recent article in Time magazine, it's too early to say we have stopped the decline in the ocean's health. Well, this is a global juggernaut requiring much time and space to make its turn. But there's no doubt that what was achieved on the ocean's behalf over the last year has been transformational. But ladies and gentlemen, it is at this point in my remarks today that I must put a firm challenge to G7 leaders as they approach their June summit in Hiroshima. All of the wonderful consensus of the multilateral agreements I have just described will be nothing more than moments of celebration if they are not duly ratified and brought into force. For universal implementation and policing of what we have agreed to, we need the international laws to be in place, and that is not the case until sufficient ratifications have been received by the appointed authorities. The pace of this progress to date has been painfully slow, and many an all-knowing pundit has tried to suck wind from our sails by opining that often such multilateral agreements take decades to achieve sufficient ratifications. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not have decades. We have months and maybe a couple of years to achieve finalization and ratification of these global agreements. In the meantime, the rot continues. Billions of public monies will continue to be spent on subsidies for industrial fishing fleets to continue their pursuit of declining fish stocks. In the absence of protection, marine ecosystems will continue to diminish before our eyes. The scourge of plastic pollution will continue to fill the ocean with its detritus. The ocean's health will continue its tragic decline. The third UN Ocean Conference will be held in a little over 2 years' time in Nice, France. And I see it as a tall lighthouse guiding us, giving us good speed for the implementation of SDG 14's available solutions. And so we have 2 years to get the job done on ratification. Fail at that, and many will be hanging their heads in shame at the next UN Ocean Conference. Therefore, my challenge to G7 leaders as they approach the Hiroshima summit is to stand tall in favor of the required ratifications and speak out in amplification of the high principles and actions that the G7 Ocean Deal has so powerfully espoused. As ever, action speaks louder than words. So good luck with most successful meeting in Sapporo next week, and deepest thanks to Japan for its leadership in these matters. And I thank you for your kind attention.
Thomson 特使ありがとうございます。
Ambassador Thompson, thank you very much. And our next speaker is Ms. Angela Paolini Elad, Deputy Director General, World Trade Organization. Ms. Elad, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Geneva. It's a pleasure to speak to you today about the major accomplishment by WTO members, the binding agreement on fisheries subsidies reached by the WTO members last June. And in particular, I'd like to talk about how it will improve ocean sustainability, its significance for the multilateral trading system, and of course, what we must do next. And Ambassador Thompson, thank you very much for your call to arms. Let me start with the ways in which this new binding multilateral WTO agreement is highly significant and meaningful. First, by prohibiting certain forms of fisheries subsidies that contribute to the most harmful fishing practices, the agreement delivers on UN Sustainable Development Goal Target 14.6 after more than 21 years of negotiations, the first SDG target addressed through a new multilateral agreement. This outcome is a result of leadership, pragmatism, and commitment to both multilateralism and environmental sustainability by all WTO members. Second, the agreement marks only the second time since the WTO's creation that our members have added a new multilateral agreement to our rulebook. The adoption by consensus of this new agreement thus represents a strong vote of confidence by our 164 members in the multilateral trading system. The agreement's adoption during a period of heightened geopolitical tensions is a particularly significant indicator of our members' ongoing commitment to multilateralism and to consensus-based decision-making at the WTO. And this gives us hope that the WTO can deliver on other challenges of the global commons, such as climate change. Third, the agreement on fisheries subsidies is the first WTO agreement with a broad environmental sustainability objective. The operation of the new disciplines will make fishing and the ocean ecosystem more sustainable by prohibiting subsidies to illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, or IUU fishing, as well as subsidies to fishing over fish stocks and subsidies to fishing on the unregulated high seas. This will directly benefit the many millions of people in developed and developing countries who depend on the fisheries sector to make a living and as a source of protein, employment, and tradable goods. As you know, the world's ocean faces enormous challenges. One of the most fundamental is the dramatic deterioration in global fish stocks, which continues unabated. By some measures, nearly half of assessed fish stocks are currently overfished, and unsustainable fisheries subsidies are a major cause of this devastation. This decline not only has huge repercussions for marine ecosystems and thus the global environment, it also has grave consequences for the millions of people around the world whose livelihoods and food security depend on fishing. The WTO agreement will help to turn this around. Let me emphasize that adoption of the agreement last June by WTO ministers did not bring an end to the WTO's work on fisheries. To the contrary, now that the agreement is concluded, WTO members are engaged in two parallel processes to carry the work forward. First is accepting the new agreement. To deliver its benefits for the ocean, the agreement must enter into force, which requires 2/3 of WTO members to deposit their instruments of acceptance with the WTO. 3 members, Switzerland, Singapore, and Seychelles, have already completed their domestic processes and submitted their instruments of acceptance. But very importantly, many other members are well advanced in their acceptance processes, and we hope to have some announcements in the very near future. My plea to officials in this audience and to anyone who is influenced with their governments is to expedite your domestic acceptance process and deposit your instrument of acceptance to the WTO quickly so that the agreement can start delivering for ocean sustainability. The second strain of ongoing work at the WTO is continuing negotiations to resolve the outstanding issues that could not be agreed at MC12. WTO members agreed to keep working on a second wave of negotiations with a view to recommending further disciplines to our next ministerial conference, which will take place in just over 10 months. A central focus of the second wave of negotiations is on disciplining subsidies that contribute to overcapacity and overfishing, along with special and differential treatment for developing and least developed members. Delegations in Geneva are already actively working on this second wave. We had a very productive week of negotiating meetings at the end of March here in Geneva, which has helped us pave the way for deeper discussions on the best approaches for curbing subsidies contributing to overcapacity and overfishing. And we will have another Fish Week at the end of April to sharpen and deepen those discussions, with further Fish Weeks to follow in the next couple of months. In parallel, the Secretariat has been conducting a series of technical workshops in different regions of the developing world to help government officials better understand the new agreement, to encourage the agreement's prompt acceptance, and to equip officials to effectively engage in the second wave of negotiations. I would also like to mention that a final but no less important point is how the agreement addresses the challenges that implementing the new disciplines will pose, especially to developing and least developed members. In this regard, the agreement provides for the establishment of a dedicated funding mechanism to support implementation of the agreement by such members. This fund is up and running, and we have already started to receive donations, with Japan being the first, and my great thanks to the government of Japan for this gesture. This action sends a strong signal to developing and least developed members that they will receive the assistance they need to implement the agreement. Let me conclude by re-emphasizing that for this agreement to come to life and start delivering its benefits for fisheries sustainability and the lives of fishermen and women globally, we need 2/3 of WTO members to accept it as soon as possible. And this bears repeating. And thanks again to Ambassador Thompson for mentioning this too. So I would just repeat my plea to use all your channels at your disposal to encourage your governments to deposit their instruments as soon as possible and to engage actively in the second wave of negotiations so they can be concluded by next year's ministerial conference in February. Thank you very much.
エラード次長、ありがとうございました。それでは最後の基調報告として、リナリー国家管轄圏外区域海洋生物多様性協定に関する生物間会議議長よりご報告いただきます。それではリー議長、よろしくお願いいたします。
Thank you very much, and afternoon to excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me please allow me to thank the Sasakawa Peace Foundation for inviting me to join this forum ahead of the G7 ministers meeting on. It's a big pleasure to be here, and the usefulness of coming in after Ambassador Thompson is that I can agree with what he said. But maybe let me just share a little about what the BBNJ agreement represents. We concluded our substantive negotiations on the BBNJ agreement just a little over a month ago. And currently, delegations are engaged in a process of technical editing. And once the technical edits have been completed, we look to adopt the agreement in all 6 official UN languages, and we're targeting June for the adoption of the agreement. The BBNJ agreement, and let me first let me express my gratitude to all the delegations for their commitment, their hard work, in actually being able to conclude the negotiations. I think it demonstrates the kind of emphasis that delegations, both large and small, from all parts of the world, have placed on, have recognized the importance of the oceans, have recognized the importance of actually wanting to create processes and mechanisms in order to achieve the objective of conservation and sustainable use. And that actually leads me to the first point, which is that which is what the BBNJ agreement is about. From the very outset of our intergovernmental conference process, what we set out to do was not so much about setting targets, but really about trying to define how to go about actually conserving and sustainably using the oceans. Our mandate, of course, mandated 4 particular aspects as a package: marine genetic resources, including the sharing of benefits, area-based management tools, including marine protected areas, environmental impact assessments, capacity building, and transfer of marine technology. And it is, and from the outset, what I had said is, I think we all know what it is we want to do. The challenge that we face is how we're supposed to go about doing what it is we want to do, and who are the actors responsible for taking actions. So this is what the BBNJ agreement set out to do, which is to articulate to some extent the processes and the mechanisms that creates a toolbox for us to be able to apply these notions, these concepts, including on marine protected areas, on how environmental impact assessments should proceed, and they also identify the actors. As you know, the BBNJ agreement has established a number of institutions, but it also talks about what the state's obligations are and where other stakeholders come in. So one feature of the BBNJ agreement, a recognition that the oceans involves more than just states, and provides for consultation processes that includes or that allows for the private sector, the civil society, scientists, indigenous people, local communities to participate in these processes, is a recognition of what the oceans represents. So the BBNJ agreement really actually sets out processes. There is, of course, a fair amount of work to amplify these processes. And part of the reason is to allow for the agreement to be future-proof. And what do I mean by that? As we all know, the years 2020 to 2030 is the UN Decade of Ocean Science. So we expect that by the end of this decade, we will know a lot more about the oceans than we do currently. And I was very conscious that we shouldn't build an agreement based only or solely or primarily on today's science. We have to give a certain leeway and a certain flexibility to allow that increase in knowledge, that greater understanding that we have about our oceans to inform our processes, to inform our mechanisms. And so I think the BBNJ agreement has a certain balance in a clarity of direction, but not to be so specific in details, because then it allows us to adapt and adjust as we learn more about the oceans. So the second point that I want to make about the BBNJ agreement, which has been made by the previous speakers, is that it needs to be ratified. It needs to enter into force. And here I'm a little bit more optimistic than what Ambassador Thompson alluded to, because I was part of the I was in Paris when we adopted the Paris Agreement on climate change. And many of you will know that the Paris Agreement has a double threshold. 55 parties represent 55% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And the Paris Agreement came into force within 1 year, despite the double threshold for entry into force. So fast entry into force is not impossible. It is a target that we can achieve. And therefore, with G7 taking the lead, would encourage everyone to focus on what needs to be done in order to ratify the agreement and to implement and to start work on implementing the agreement. There have been, as you have heard during the IGC itself, resources available to help developing countries or less well-resourced countries, I should say, to prepare for ratification and implementation. First, the GEF, the Global Environment Facility, has come on board and has already set aside funds to assist in the ratification and implementation process. And as you heard, the European Union has also pledged funds in order to enable countries to begin the ratification and implementation process. And I think it's no accident that the first section of the text to have been agreed was the section on capacity building and technology transfer, reflecting that the conference as a whole valued and understood how important capacity building and transfer of marine technology would be in order to achieve the objective of the agreement. And the previous speakers have also alluded to the fact that these achievements over the past year in oceans, including the agreement on fishery subsidies, including the Kunming-Montreal deal, including the BBNJ agreement, shows that where there is commitment and there is dedication, we can actually make progress. And so it is important for all of us to press on, to not rest, but to press on. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
李議長、ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. Now, based upon those remarks, I'd like to now move on to a panel discussion. This is about the toward sustainable marine environment, the collaboration between G7 and international community. And this is going to be moderated by Mr. Masanori Kobayashi, the chief researcher of the OPRI. if you have questions or comments, you can upload them by using the URL that's on the screen. Now over to you, Mr. Kobayashi.
From OPRI Sasakawa Peace Foundation. I really thank keynote speakers, Ambassador Peter Thompson, and also Deputy DG Angela Polani-Elad, and also Ambassador Rina Lee for sharing with us your first-hand observation and future perspectives for the very important international policy processes for achieving a sustainable ocean. We have 3 panelists here who are also very experienced in ocean policy processes. And at the same time, we also have additional panelists joining from overseas online. So first, I thank keynote speakers to stay with us for the panel discussions, but please allow me to invite some of other panelists who haven't yet spoken to share their perspectives. I'd like to first begin with Mr. Shingo Ota, Special Advisor to the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery, to be followed by Ms. Jyoti Mata-Philip, and then Ms. Mina Epps and others. But I just wanted to invite Mr. Ota. Thank you for joining us. And I guess Ms. Deputy DG Elad mentioned it is very urgent to have expeditious ratification of this fishery agreement. I think 2/3 members have to adopt ratify this agreement. And she also refers to this IUU fishing. This is also the very important topic that we have to address. I just wondered, Mr. Ota has any reactions to the presentation made by the DG Elad, and any further reflections as to what actions has to be undertaken for achieving sustainable ocean, particularly sustainable fisheries and eliminating IUU fishing. Mr. Ota, please.
Thank you, Mr. Kobayashi. Let me first thank you for inviting me to this important event. And regarding the fishery subsidy agreement, we very much welcome the new agreement after long years of negotiation. Actually, I was involved in the very early stage of the negotiation back in early 2000, before the actual negotiation started. So I'm very glad to see the conclusion of the negotiation. So my view is that perhaps this agreement can be utilized to improve the fishery management. As Ms. Elad explained, this agreement prohibits certain forms of subsidies, particularly subsidies contributing to the IUU fishing. And in this case, perhaps government can tell fishermen, or should tell fishermen, if you do not comply with management rules, you cannot get any subsidy. And in the case of subsidies for fisheries catching overfished stocks, I have seen many cases that when the catch is decreasing, fishermen frequently come to the agreement and ask for help, them alleviate the situation. But under this new agreement, government should tell fishermen that if you want us to help you, we first have to establish a recovery plan. Otherwise, I cannot give you any subsidies. So in this way, I think this agreement can be utilized to improve the fishery management overall. And regarding the IUU activities, I think the characteristics of IUU has been changing in the past several decades. Initially, it was meaning the flag of convenience, but now I think the main focus is about non-compliance of members to regional fisheries management organization. Although we have seen several real IUU fishing vessels changing flags frequently and to avoid management measures. But I think the major part of IUU now is non-compliance of members. So I think of course, I will touch upon, maybe this meeting will touch upon the trade issues at a later stage, but at this point, I'd like to stress one point. Of course, Japan followed the European Union and the United States in introducing import or trade control measures. But quickly looking at the FAO statistics, the share of those EU, US, and Japan in terms of import, fishery import, only 36%. So 64% of the fishery import is conducted by other countries. So of course, it's important for the major market states to control imports, but at the same time, we should pursue a multilateral approach. In this regard, Japan is taking initiative in two areas. One is Japan is trying to establish a catch documentation scheme for Pacific bluefin tuna, and actually I'm chairing the working group. And secondly, Japan is trying to expand the scope of the catch documentation scheme in ICAT. ICAT is an International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas. ICAT introduced a catch documentation scheme for Atlantic bluefin tuna because in the early 2000, IUU fishing was rampant, and the Commission took many measures, including trade measures, catch documentation scheme. And this greatly contributed to the reduction of IUU activities. And now Japan is advocating that the coverage of CDS or catch documentation scheme should be expanded to other species, including big-eyed tuna, swordfish, and yellowfin tuna. Unfortunately, because CDS requires lots of capacity, members of ICAT do not necessarily support, particularly developing countries, saying that they don't have enough capacity to implement it. But we don't give up, and we will continue to try to persuade other members to accept this measure. So with that, I'd like to finish.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ota, for your remarks. And I think we will come back to you about how we can really support developing countries to comply with the measures that Japan and others are trying to promote, such as catch documentation schemes and eliminate IUU fishing. Thank you indeed. I will now ask and invite Ms. Jyoti Mathu-Philip, Executive Secretary, Secretariat of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee for Plastic Pollution, that I think Ambassador Peter Thompson's and also our Minister Nishimura and Minister Hoshino mentioned as one of the key policy issue to achieve sustainable ocean. May I invite Ms. Jyoti Mathu-Philip to take our floor.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me, Dr. Atsushi Tsunami, President of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation, Your Excellency Akihiro Nishimura, Minister of Environment, Ambassador Thompson, Your Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to join this International Forum on Sustainable Ocean and G7 Ministers meeting on climate, energy and environment in Sapporo. Thank you for inviting me to participate in this august body. And at the start, I would also like to thank the government of Japan for their support to this important agenda with the launch of the Blue Oceans Initiative, and also for directly supporting the INC Secretariat. This is a very important time when you have invited me to participate here. And I just want to give you a little bit of a background on the legally binding agreement on plastic pollution. So as you may know, UNEA 5.2 called for the development of such an instrument, which is also included. It also includes the marine environment. The resolution specifies that the plastic treaty should be based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastics, could include both binding and voluntary approaches, and it takes into account the Rio Declaration and national circumstances and capabilities. They requested for an international negotiating committee to start negotiations on this legally binding agreement, and it started to start its work during the second half of 2022. And we are not sprinting. We're running really fast because we have to complete our work by the end of 2024, and we were asked to do to organize 5 sessions of the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. The first one took place in Punta del Este, Uruguay last year from 28th of November, where we had a very huge number of participants that came to Punta del Este, over 1,400. We had 147 states that participated and the EU. We had 10 IGOs and 409 NGOs that came to the INC1. We had 2 very interesting stakeholder discussions there. One was a multi-stakeholder forum, which took place before the meeting. And then we had an in-session stakeholder dialogue, which took place during the meeting. And you can find all the documentation on this on our website. And of course, the full coverage can be found on the Earth Negotiations Bulletin. So now we are on the road to INC2, which will take place in Paris from 29th of May to 2nd of June. There will be regional consultations on 28th of May. France is also hosting an interactive high-level event to end plastic pollution on 27th of May, and they will be sending out their invitations shortly. And their intention is to discuss solutions at all stages of the plastic life cycle. We will also have 12 thematic side events, which will be held from Monday to Thursday, and a notification has gone out, and this can also be found on our website. So please do go to our website to get more information. And for participants that wish to attend our meeting, the deadline for registration is 28th of April. So what will happen at INC2? At INC2, the member states will have an opportunity to decide between potential options for what could be included in a future international legally binding instrument. This is an extremely important part of the whole 2.5-year process, because this is what will allow the member states to then decide the mandate for INC3, which could be to develop a zero draft of the instrument for consideration at INC3. And this is where we need your leadership and vision to ensure that we produce a dynamic discussion in Paris, and that we rise up to the challenge. So just to talk a little bit about the options paper at INC1, the Secretariat was requested to prepare a document with potential options for elements towards an international legally binding instrument based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastics. And this should include the identification of objectives, substantive provisions, including core obligations, control measures, and voluntary approaches, implementation measures, and means of implementation. To this end, the committee invited members and stakeholders to submit written submissions to the Secretariat on potential options for elements, which would be the basis of the document that we produced. All of these submissions are available on our website. We also got a lot of interest from stakeholders and member states making their submissions. We had about 187 submissions from stakeholders, and we had 67 submissions, of which 5 were from a group of countries. So we have about 119 countries that have expressed their views on what should be in a potential options for elements paper. We hope this paper will go up sometime next week in the advanced English version, and we invite you to look at it and start, speaking with your focal points on what should continue to be in the document. So what do we expect of INC2? We expect them to consider, the member states to consider the options paper that has been prepared. We wish them to identify areas that will require further work and to agree on a set of potential options for each of the core obligations. And then we hope that there will be a mandate to prepare a zero draft text of the instrument for consideration at INC3. There should also be an agreement on any intersessional work that needs to be carried out between INC2 and INC3. And I think, this will allow us to get further on in the process. It is my hope that the G7 ministers will provide the leadership and vision that I was talking about, and to create a robust and effective international legally binding agreement. As you know, the world is facing an unprecedented crisis as our oceans and waterways become increasingly polluted with plastic waste, harming both our environment and the health of our communities. So maybe our combined bold action will ensure that an ambitious and transformational agreement is adopted in 2 years for the benefit of human health and environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary Ms. Jyoti Matthew-Philip. I am sure that as Minister Nishimura expressed a very strong support to the ongoing negotiations with the hope that this will be concluded by the end of next year. I hope that there will be a substantive progress, and the Japanese government and the stakeholder can provide further input to support such a negotiations. We have Mr. Matsuzawa from the Environment Ministry who can also share with us his insight. But before inviting him, I would also like to listen to Ms. Mina Epps, Director, Ocean Team, International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN. She has been supporting this 30 by 30 negotiation, BBNJ negotiation, and also a successful convening of the International Marine Protected Area Conference in Vancouver last February. May I invite Mina to take a floor?
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests and participants, good morning and good afternoon to you all. It is my honor to join you, so thank you very much for the kind invitation to speak, to address you, to say a few words on behalf of IUCN and the work that we do. Obviously, I'm following a tall order of speakers in front of me, a lot of excellent speakers, in fact, with also injecting a lot of optimism. You really highlighted, the historic achievement that we've seen today happened recently, but also setting those ambitious targets and the need to move to action. And I'd like to take this opportunity as well to thank Ms. President Lee, Rina Lee, for her excellent leadership. And she really delivered on multilateralism, the promise of multilateralism. So thank you once again, my heartfelt thank you. On this, we're thinking about how do we move from these, global goals and ambition. By the end of the day, we need to implement them, and we need to build that capacity of governments, national governments, to implement it. But we also need real boots on the ground. That is why IUCN is the convener of the International Marine Protected Area Congresses, something that started, with a few hundred practitioners that really has grown. And the last impact was actually had almost 4,000 registered participants from 123 countries. It was a very timely opportunity and the first international convening after the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Protocol. So it's really talking about how do you go from that global ambition and translate it into action. There was very strong voices from youth, from indigenous peoples communities. We talked about how can you actually reach the 30 by 30 target. It's not just what counts, it's who counts. And how do you make sure that you have indigenous peoples and local communities on board and consulted. So thanks to everyone who joined there. There was also a leaders forum where we actually looked at synergies between the multilateral environmental agreements. And we know that we have come a long way in terms of setting those ambitious targets. So we need to be bold, visionary, but also pragmatic and translating them into real action. And I think that there is a lot to learn from different processes. So President of INC for the Plastic Global Treaty, Mr. Philippe, I really wish you also the best of luck in this endeavor, and we look forward to seeing you in Paris. And I think there could be a lot of excellent lessons learned from the BBNJ process. So there's been a lot of focus on the global biodiversity framework, particularly target 3, but we must also not remember the other targets, target 2 in terms of restoration. If we want to protect the ocean, we need to remove the health, build resilience and enhance recovery. And we need certain modalities and mechanism and a lot of resource mobilization in order to achieve that. The IUCN works to put out international guidelines and standards, whether it's nature-based solutions, a global standard for nature-based solutions, the definitions and guidance documents for marine protected area, and quite recently also international guidelines for other effective conservation measures. So we're looking forward to see how they can apply as well as to the high seas. Obviously, bringing together the convenings we did in Vancouver was really, fulfilling the common ambition, basically requires to unlocking innovative solutions, finance solutions to close that significant conservation funding gap. And this is also where we need to have marine protected areas that are effective, that are strictly and highly protected to deliver those benefits. But in terms of other effective conservation measures, we need to make sure that they are also adhering to international guidelines. But the benefit that could be through other effective conservation mechanism is that they might avoid the kind of funding and capacity gaps that marine protected areas have been, to a large extent, not been fully implemented or effectively managed. So I'm not going to talk too much about the BBNJ agreement. We know that we've heard from the president, but the high seas really, the treaty opens a pathway for humankind to finally provide the protection for marine life that is across vast swatches of the ocean. Its adoption will close a significant legal gap that has been missing, but we need to work together. But this provides the framework for government to do so. So we're really optimistic. We're hoping that the BBNJ treaty will not undermine, but it will strengthen other existing bodies, whether it's the Regional Fisheries Management Organization, the ISA, or even being an inspiration for CAMELAR, so we can move forward and create those marine protected areas. The G7, the Ocean Deal, also called for this to happen. So we know that we need to get beyond yes. So there's a long road and we have just started, but we need to, I was really encouraged by the positivism that we can do this, learning, seeking the inspiration for other international processes where it has been done. So taking those best examples, you mentioned the Paris Agreement, but also the CBD, it was done in 18 months. So let's focus on the target, and hopefully Ambassador Thompson, when we will reconvene for the 3rd United Nations Ocean Conference in Nice, that will be to celebrate the BBNJ agreement having entered into force. So I think with that, I will conclude, and thank you very much for being on allow me to be on this distinguished panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mina, for your remarks and inspiring suggestions. So I have a pleasure to invite Mr. Yutaka Matsuzawa, the Director General, Global Environment Bureau, Ministry of the Environment, who will share with us his ideas to how the Japanese government or Japanese stakeholders can actually support first this marine plastic negotiation and fight against eliminating marine plastic pollutions, and also this marine protected area 30 by 30. Last week, the Japanese cabinet adopted this national biodiversity action plan, and it contains a number of key features. So may I invite Mr. Matsuzawa to take a floor and share with us your perspectives.
Thank you very much for your invitation. First, the marine plastic pollution, and the international negotiation is going on for a binding instrument, and how the approach of the Japanese government to it. But before the negotiation began in 2019, G20 summit meeting was held in Osaka, Japan. And concerning the marine plastic pollution, the large users of plastics or the large emitters are not limited to developed nations. So the large number of the countries needed to be involved in order to tackle this problem. And to that end, in 2019 at the Osaka G20 summit, the Japanese government led the discussion, and together with other participating countries, we succeeded in formulating Osaka Blue Ocean Vision. And right now, more than 80 countries and areas share this vision and the implementation framework as members. And after Osaka, Saudi Arabia, Italy, and last year, Indonesia also joined. So the action at the G20, therefore, has continued together with the successive presidency countries, together with the government of Japan. So this framework initiated at the G20 will continue, and the Japanese government will continue to provide support. In addition to negotiations, these practical approaches like this should continue involving as many stakeholders as possible. That is for one. And secondly, the negotiation for an internationally binding agreement to stop the plastic pollution. So Japan, as a Asia-Pacific country, which represents more than 50 countries and areas, and we also hope that as many countries as possible join this process to formulate the agreement. So amongst more than 50 countries, the two countries are represented at the Bureau, Japan and Jordan. So the Asia-Pacific region includes a large country, a continental size, as well as oil-producing nations and the island nations, which represent so many different variety of the conditions. So, but we hope to we decided to support so that the variety of the specific conditions can be reflected, and that's the background against which these two countries are nominated in the Bureau. And also, Japan expected that the launch of this negotiation process, and the last year, Japan's plastic recycling law took effect. They are covering the entire life cycle of plastic, starting with the production and the use and the disposal. But the used plastic shouldn't be released into the ocean. We need to prevent the used plastics to be released into the ocean through waterways, including rivers. So we would like to contribute the substantially and intellectually to the negotiation process. So Secretary General Judy, well, Hiroshi Ono, who was nominated by Japan to join the Bureau, have been working closely with the Judy and other members. And for the concerning 30 by 30, just the other day, the Japan's national strategy on the biodiversity 23 to 2030 was adopted, which includes the national program for 30 by 30. The taking action is really crucial now. As Mina said, a variety of stakeholders have to be engaged in order to realize 30 by 30. So privately owned areas should be utilized, and the fishers and those people who are protecting the marine tourism resources and other NPO members should be invited to work with us in order to genuinely realize 30 by 30. So we have national parks in Japan, which are owned and managed by the government. But in addition, the private initiatives should be promoted, for example, through OECM. So starting this year, we started a certification process of the various the areas outside of the preservation areas.
These national strategies for the biodiversity lays out a number of approaches to achieve 30 by 30 targets. We are a bit running out of time, but I still have 2 more panelists. I hope that they can make a punchy point quickly. And after that, I'd like to invite keynote speakers and panelists to share with us their perspectives before we conclude today's discussions. So may I now invite Mr. Tetsuji Ida, Senior Editor and Reporter, Kyodo News, to share with us your perspectives on the issues that we have been addressing for sustainable ocean.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Tetsuji Ida, environment news writer working for Kyodo News, reporting environment for more than 35 years. And it's very nice to see Mr. Peter Thompson on the screen. I remember that we had an intense discussion about the ocean at the Davos meeting in January. Thank you so much for inviting me. Firstly, I have to apologize that I have to leave here in the 5 minutes so to attend on another online meeting. So can you share my screen? I prepared some materials for my presentation. Yes, go ahead. I have to go ahead. Yeah, I want to issue as a reporter, as an experience last 2 or 3 years, I want to raise the issue of IUU and severe human rights violation. This is a Thailand fisherman 55 years old. Definitely, he's not looking very happy. So because he suffered 6 years slave labor in Thailand fishing vessel. And this is the statement he gave me. And I don't have any time to get into details, but you can see the string and what he told me in my interview. Because the passport was taken and he have to work sometime more than 20 hours, sometime or 2 or 3 days without left. And he actually, after 6 years, he has no payment. This is the reality of the Japan fisheries industry happening in the ocean. Next one is I cannot say his name, but he anonymous. He's an Indonesian fisherman. I did an online interview with him in August 2021. He was a victim of 2 years of slave labor on Chinese tuna fishing boat. And this is what he said to me. It's very lengthy, and I want to share this materials with our panelists and participants. So please look carefully and intensely on his comment and what he said to me. The story is very much similar. That he was suffered severe hard work without paying and no clean water and enough food. And he said that on the Chinese vessel, shark finning, that word shark finning is mostly prohibited by rules on international organization or some nations. This is and shark finning was also they conducted shark finning daily, and this is what I say that during busy time he have to work 25 years and one day or more, and basically there is no payment by Chinese ship owners. And this is what he said to me. This was one of the most important issues is the tuna took mainly that the shark fins goes to Chinese market, but also they caught some tunas, and that the tunas was brought into Japanese market. And sometime the major trading company involved in this kind of import. So and this is what he said. He said that he saw the Japanese transit coming to his fishing boat, and they brought the tuna into the Japanese boat, and he said that it's going to Japanese market. And there are some report made by the NGOs called Environment Justice Foundation, and they made huge research and interviews, and sometimes using satellite trackings. And they have some evidence that the IUU involved tuna is brought to Japanese market. This is shark finning on the Japanese vessel, on the Chinese vessel. Somehow shocking to me. And yeah, this is my conclusion. And I know that as Ota-san said that many participants said that IUU is very much serious. This is but the issue is not only for the fish resources, but we needed to have human rights exploitation, mostly happening IUU vessel. So the IUU fisheries and severe human rights violation often coming to hand in hand. So in this sense, the seventh action is very important. So international coordination is a key to fight IUU and human rights violation. And major three seafood market, EU and US and Japan, involved in G7 meeting. So Otherwise, IUU marine products without any international coordination, IUU marine products excluded from one market will flow into the market to countries with weaker regulation. So we needed to have international coordination. And also, ladies and I think that Ota-san said that we have huge seafood market other than these 7 countries. So I think it's imperative that necessary to channel and use international forum to encourage emerging countries such as China to join us. And this is, we are coming to the discussion of G7 meeting in Sapporo. I saw some internal document, and I will show you. There are some, in the draft communique of a Sapporo meeting, there are reference to the IUU and also the WTO agreement of fisheries subsidies, and also the important agreement of FAO, the Port State measures. This is very good, and we also encourage, they said that we also encourage non-party to the Port State measure to join in. And this is a very good sign, and if G7 goes to this way, I think this is a very important commitment. But ocean is not treated rather than lightly in the meeting. But for me, that ocean issue is treated rather lightly in this meeting compared to the energy or climate change or biodiversity. And I think more concrete, comprehensive, multidimensional commitment are needed to include, including human rights issues. So my message is clear. IUU is very much serious. It's good, definitely it's not for the marine resources, but don't forget about human rights issue. That's my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ida.
And by saying so, I have to say goodbye. I'm so sorry that I have to leave my podium.
So
I'm so sorry.
I have Mr. Torsten TL. I have to apologize that we have to give you just 1 minute to make a punchy point, and then I wanted to entertain some more questions, but I have one questions that, if possible, ask Deputy DG Angela Elad and Mr. Ota. But Torsten, can you try to make a point very quickly, just 1 minute?
Ladies and gentlemen, G7 leadership on ocean governance is crucial. We need to urgently reduce ocean stressors, scale up robust ocean solutions. On the stressor side, a lot was mentioned. Just to add 2 more things, we need a coordinated global response to all other forms of marine pollution, chemicals, contaminants, fertilizers, nitrogens, and to address the data and the evidence gap, develop a zero pollution pathway. On the precautionary pause on unsustainable deep seabed mining, we need to salute those G7 countries that have committed and get more on board. On the solution side, we need a strategy that focuses on the ocean climate biodiversity nexus and addresses all the institutional capacity and financial issues. Only a nature positive strategy that focuses on ecosystem-based management can deliver sustainable ocean governance. And that means we need to, now that we have a pathway for the high seas, to integrate the BBNJ processes fully into ocean data monitoring infrastructure, which is required both to optimize operations and activities, but also to manage marine protection on the largest possible scale. We need private-public partnership approaches. We need to invest into blue natural capital. We need to fully implement the ocean component, the marine aspects, in all of the sustainable finance taxonomies and standards that are presently being developed, like the TFND. So just to close, let's build on the German G7 ocean deal of last year and encourage Japan and the G7 now to have a G7 Ocean Plus deal that delivers on action and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Torsten. I have one question, if still possible, to pose to Deputy DG Angela Elad and Mr. Otta. Question is how to engage big and leading fishing nations in this harmful fishery agreement and Port State Measures Agreement. Deputy DG's Angela Elad, do you have any supplementary remarks on this strategy as to how to engage the major and the leading fishing nations?
Well, yes, I absolutely do. And thank you to all the speakers who provided such inspiring insights into their particular work. I think that one of the advantages of the WTO process is that our decision making is by consensus, which means all 164 of our members agreed on the fisheries agreement. So that is the foundation, I think, for us to engage governments. The most important thing right now is entry into force of the agreement now. And we need not just governments to take steps, but we need the private sector, we need NGOs, we need civil society behind them too. Because this agreement is more than about just simply fishing subsidies, which is already a big deal. It's about creating more transparency in fishing practices. That's one of the key components of this agreement. It is also an opportunity to help developing countries build fisheries management systems that they may not have already, and to provide meaningful assistance in that regard through this agreement and in working with our partners at the World Bank and the FAO. I think that some of the points that have been made about how the fishing, the dangers of fisheries subsidies, it's not just about the fish or the health of the ocean, it's also a human rights issue. And I think that very much broadens the conversation and means that there are more actors who can step up to try to push for ratification of this agreement, but also for the next wave of negotiations. The OECD estimates $20 billion per year in harmful fisheries subsidies. Just imagine if we were to take that funding and to be able to use it for purposes of restoring global fish stocks and ending some of these deplorable practices that we see all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for your remarks. Maybe Ota-san, do you have anything to add on this?
On fishery subsidy? Yes. Yes, of course, based on the agreement, government can eliminate harmful subsidies. That would be very fantastic. But based on my experience, once government start granting subsidies, it's very difficult to stop it. That's why I said, rather than trying to eliminate subsidies, we should utilize the subsidies to improve fishery management as a strong incentive for fishermen to accept painful regulations. But of course, the main purpose of the agreement is to eliminate subsidies, and I hope that all the governments involved can do that. But if it's not so easy, I think there could be other ways to utilize this agreement. That's what I wanted to stress. Thank you.
I see that this is really the continuous process. So maybe I invite keynote speakers to say just a word before we conclude these panel discussions. Maybe we go with Ambassador Rinari. I think this global acceptance and implementation is a common issue for BBNJ. Do you say anything before we conclude this, Rina?
Just to say thank you. I mean, I think listening to the other panel speakers, I think there should be that realization that actually there's a lot of work that's already going on. And that what we should do is to try to adopt, sign, ratify the agreement to pull all these different threads together for a better coordination that delivers real impact in the oceans. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Jyoti Matthew Phillips, do you have anything to say before we conclude?
Thank you so much. I do want to actually say that it's really been a pleasure to hear a lot about the Global Biodiversity Framework. I was leading that work till I started taking this work till I started here. So it's good to see that people are talking about implementation of the GBF. I hope that we are going to start talking about and I also heard that we want to develop and adopt this new plastics treaty very quickly. And I really think that one of the wisest things I heard was how stakeholders here and everywhere can actually, give advice to their governments and support their governments in trying to develop to agree on a legally binding agreement on plastic. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay, thank you, Jyoti. And we will share with you the additional elements from the speakers and the panelists on our website. But with the final word by Ambassador Peter Thompson, I would like to conclude this panel discussions. Peter, you have a final word.
Thank you very much, Masanori. Very rich discussions. You know, this has been a fantastic panel to be part of and listen to. Look, just very quickly, the Osaka Blue Ocean Vision, you know, that set the bar high, and look how it flowed on to things like G20. During the Indonesian presidency of G20, the Ocean 20 was introduced, and there are signs that India is carrying that forward during their presidency of the G20. So these things all connect with each other. And what Germany did last year with the ocean deal was inspirational for ocean action. And I really join 100% with what Torsten said about the G7 this year has to do an ocean deal plus. We cannot rest on our laurels. We look to G7 for leadership. And in this case, with the Japanese presidency, it is in your hands, Japan. And I think this is the main message for Sapporo and from Sapporo on to Hiroshima. It's in your hands to make the bar go higher on this. And we've heard on this panel how urgently we need that bar to be lifted. So Ocean Deal Plus, Hiroshima, I hope to read about you in due course.
Thank you, Peter. And apologies that those who didn't say a final word, but we will stay in touch with you to share with your views. So with this, I'd like to ask you to give a big round of applause to the panelists on the stage and on the screen. And I thank you for your attention, and we will conclude the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
ご登壇いただきました皆様、思いあふれる活発なディスカッションありがとうございました。
To all the panelists and participants, thank you very much for a very productive and inspirational discussion. I'd like to express appreciation once again by a big round of applause. Now, at the end of the seminar, I should like to invite the president of the OPRI, Dr. Hide Sakaguchi, to conclude.
First of all, I thank you very much for participating this international forum today. We had 60 persons in person in this auditorium and also 150 participants by online today. This number means the topic we discussed today is very, very important, and also we should solve the problem, all together. As many of the keynote speakers and panelists mentioned, multilateral agreement is easy to say, but it's very difficult to implement. And also, Today we discussed about the BBNJ and also IUU fishing and the plastic pollution issues. But one thing we should not forget is G7 or G20 is a matter of great countries, but we should not forget the small developing countries. Let me give me just 1 minute to add most important issues. 2 months ago, I visited small town in Philippines. The name of the city is Dagpan. The population is about 170,000. It's a middle size, but no sewage, no water supply there. And for last 60 years, they don't have any method how to deal with garbage, not only plastic, everything. And then at the end, you know, they have about 10 stories height dump site, you know, mountain along the beach. And then I directly, you know, went there and explained by the city mayor the reality. And when I was there, I stayed there just 30 minutes because it's too smelly and difficult to be there more than an hour. But within 30 minutes, lots of plastic waste flown away just by small, you know, wind. And then it went to the beach and also into the ocean. And it looks like hopeless. No matter how, you know, G7 or G20 countries make an effort, you know, to reduce plastic waste. So in that sense, as we discussed by many keynote speakers, we should think about and take an action, not just by G7 or G20 countries, but try to take an action as a leader to the underdeveloping countries. Otherwise, we, you know, human beings on this one planet can never, ever, you know, solve the problem. And as Ida-san mentioned, for IUU fishing, it contains lots of, you know, reasons, but we should not forget about human rights. This is the most important issues to solve the problem internationally. Thank you very much. And once again, thank you very much for all the effort from the participants and also audience. Thank you and good night.
以上、坂口所長よりご挨拶を申し上げました。以上をもちまして、国際フォーラム持続可能な海洋と G7、2023年 G7 札幌気候・エネルギー・環境大臣会合に向けてを閉会いたします。
This concludes the International Forum Sustainable Ocean and the G7 Ministers Meeting on Climate, Energy and Environment in Sapporo. Thank you very much indeed for your participating, sharing time from your busy schedule. I appreciate if you could answer our questionnaire and send your answer to us by 11:59 p.m. tonight with your straightforward and frank opinions. And the OPRI SPF will organize various events for this fiscal year. Please consult our website or mail magazine for details. Once again, thank you very much indeed for your participating in this international forum.